We are live and we have a lot to cover tonight. So it was truly an historic day in the city of Pittsburgh as the longest strike in American history. Just take that in for a second, you guys. It finally came to an end today. So about 25 Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh members returned to work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette today, this morning, for the first time in more than 3 years. That's 37 months. That's 1,133 days of strike. After a court ruling last week upheld an earlier NLRB decision in their favor after the after the PG Publishing, which owns the newspaper, bargained in bad faith by demanding that the union allow subcontracting, change work hours, and scale back health benefits, according to PublicSource. Now, the group, which includes Pulitzer Prize-winning reporters, copy editors, designers, and photojournalists, voted last week to end the strike and offered to return to work. When the union walked out in October of 22, it said members had already gone more than 3 years without a contract. And I know that to be true because I left the Post-Gazette. I was a journalist there until 2020, and we were working without a contract while I was there. And management had declared an impasse and imposed wage cuts, weaker health insurance, reduced vacation for veteran staff, and fewer job protections. All of that is true. So here with me to discuss this monumental day and what this means moving forward is Andrew Goldstein. He is the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh President. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. I thought I screwed that up for a second, but I didn't. Andrew, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here, Natalie. It's a big day, historic day, as you said. So,
Yeah.
happy we can finally get to this point where we can have this discussion.
Absolutely. So I know it's been a long day, but I have to tell you, I teared up when I read the news that you guys had ended the strike and you were going back to work. I've been interviewing a lot of the guild members on KDK radio on my different platforms over the last 3 years and have been really immersed in what was going on. But before we get into all the nuts and bolts, I just want to know, human to human, how did it feel today?
It felt weird,
Yeah.
I kind of, I talked to a few of my colleagues when we were up in the newsroom finally, and it was just really surreal to all of us. This is a place where we spend so much of our lives as journalists in the newsroom. And obviously, in recent years with COVID and, remote work, things have changed a little bit. But, I know that in the Post Gazette newsroom, I've lived, some of the most monumental moments of my life.
Yeah.
And I'm sure for everyone who's worked there for any period of time, it's the same. We've seen some of the greatest moments in Pittsburgh history, and some of the worst, and we have personal memories, many of them. And so, going back up there was something that I had envisioned for a long time, and dreamed about it, and it felt like a dream today.
Yeah. Were you worried at any point that you weren't going to actually be able to get in the building? I mean, I can't imagine that, the owners were wanting to give like a warm reception, but was there any indication that you were actually going to be able to walk into work today?
Yeah, well, we did not know what that reception was going to be
Mhm.
until we walked in the door.
Mhm.
We had, as you noted, voted to end our strike last week and send a notice to the company that we intend to return to work on Monday the 24th, unless told otherwise. Which would have been fine, but we never heard any official word from the company. We never got any response, and so we didn't know what to expect. And so when we went there today, we had our rally planned, and it was great to see all the community support that we had
Mhm.
for us. Um, but then, truly, when I turned around and waved everyone to come to the door, um, I didn't know if that door was going to open or not. So when I grabbed, I had my old key card that I flashed. I don't actually know if it worked or not, or if the security just buzzed me in, but I grabbed the handle of the door and I pulled it open. I wasn't sure what would happen, but when the door opened, I was just, just so relieved in so many ways, and I, there's a lot of work obviously still to be done, but just getting back into that building was such a big step.
Mm.
And now we can really do, I think, a lot of good work moving forward to, um, try to rebuild here.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that rebuilding may look like here in a moment. But for people that just may not know much about this whole situation, can you just give the highlights in terms of why you ended up going on strike in the first place over 3 years ago, 1,133 days ago?
Sure. So there were a number of reasons. The Guild was one of 5 unions at the PG when the strike started, and then those 5 unions went on strike.
Hmm.
Um, and we had, each of these unions kind of had their somewhat separate issues. For the Guild, as you noted earlier, we had our contract illegally taken away from us
Yeah.
in 2020. That was our 2014 to 17 contract that we had been trying to, bargain a successor agreement to.
Hmm.
And as you noted also, the company was bargaining in bad faith, wouldn't give anything beneficial to the workers at all. They basically put a deal out onto the table in 2017 when we started the bargaining process, and they'd never changed their stance. It was a bad faith contract that they put out, and over a span of up until 2020, they never changed a single position. And then in 2020, when they declared impasse, they illegally. That basically meant they illegally took our contract away and imposed working conditions that included things like the ability to change our health care at any time or take it away entirely. They didn't want to guarantee us a 40-hour work week. They changed overtime rules. They changed vacation. They changed all sorts of things, layoff procedures, all sorts of job protections. And, really, um, obviously, when you talk about labor, everything comes down to the money, sure.
Yeah.
But the truth is, this strike was about a lot more than that. It was about the fundamental rights that we, as Guild members, have had at the Post-Gazette for more than 90 years now. The Guild is not a new union. We've been around for nearly a century, and we
Mhm.
have fought. Guild members have fought for decades for these rights, and we didn't want to let them go so easily. So we had those issues kind of hanging over everything. At the same time, with the other unions, they had a situation where the company basically told them that their health care was going to change from the union bargained health care over to the company health care, which provides less coverage and is a lot more expensive.
Mm.
And it was just cost prohibitive for those workers.
Yeah.
And so when the unions in those, or the workers in those 4 unions saw that, they said, well, we're not going to accept this. So then the PG just didn't give them any health insurance at all.
Wow.
So they were left without coverage. And so they walked out, and that triggered a series of events that led also the Guild to walking out a few days later on our own unfair labor practice charges.
It brings up a whole other conversation for another time, but really the entanglement of our healthcare system and our employment system is just, it's so outrageous that it should even come down to that at all. Um, Now, I've interviewed, like I said, several of the Guild members over the past 3 years, trying to just keep the momentum going of what you guys were dealing with. But I have to be honest, I never thought that this would go on for as long as it did. Andrew, in your wildest dreams, did you think that you would be on strike for 3 years when you walked out that day in October of 2022?
No, absolutely not. I knew we were in for a fight.
Yeah.
I knew this was not going to be an easy ordeal. It certainly was not. Um, but 3 years is just an amazing amount of time. I was just thinking, comparing things in my life that I've done for a period of 3 years, and I mean, it's almost the length of time that I was in high school or college. I mean, it's an incredible amount of time. Um, when you really think about it. So no, and it was very challenging. I didn't expect it to last this long. I thought, maybe a few months. I mean, maybe at worst a year. Um, but when it became clear that the wheels of justice were moving, but very slowly, we just kind of had to buckle down and do what we had to do to survive. And I think we did a really good job of that. But it was a big challenge.
How many people were in the union before the strike, and how many people? I know it's 25 now, so there were a lot of people sort of lost along the way. Was that difficult as people maybe took different jobs or even returned to the newsroom and crossed that picket line?
Yeah, well, for the most part, the people who came out with us initially stayed out. I think, of the people who went on strike, maybe a handful, maybe about five or so ever ended up going back in. A lot of them, as you mentioned, took other jobs. In many cases, outside of the journalism industry or left Pittsburgh for other jobs. Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking. To be honest with you, each and every one of them, I feel like, leaves a scar for me.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't, you know, I wish so badly I could have done more to prevent that, because, it's not just that these are your colleagues, but these are quality journalists who care about the city, and they're great colleagues, and we care about each other too, and so, yeah, it was heartbreaking to see a lot of these people leave. In some cases, people who I'd worked with for almost a decade. In other cases, young people who I thought, had really promising, up and coming careers who are now, practicing journalism in other cities,
Yeah.
which is a loss for Pittsburgh. So, yeah, I mean, it was it, that was probably one of the worst parts of it for me, was seeing, people who I really liked and respected leave, and
Yeah.
that's that's going to leave a scar.
Absolutely. And I hear you completely. And I hope you know that the blame falls squarely on the shoulders of the company. And of course, you did the very best that you could, but you're just one person. And like all of you, you have your own dreams and your own goals, and you want to stay in this collective. And so I have to ask, speaking of going back in to that experience, what was the reception like today from coworkers, or what did you see when you walked in the newsroom? Because I'm guessing it's going to be a little awkward at first to reconnect with people that have crossed picket lines and new people that have come into the space that have crossed the picket line.
Sure. So, today, when we walked in, the only people who were in the newsroom, were the managers, actually.
Hmm.
And a couple of administrative and IT workers as well, to help us kind of get set back up. Um, I have to give the Post Gazette credit here. They were prepared for us. We
Hmm.
had a nice long chat, to kind of get updated on what was going on, and you know uh, have a lot of our questions answered. Obviously, there's things that are just going to have to be worked out over the coming days and weeks here.
Hmm.
Um, but, you know, uh, it was very very weird, as I said earlier, it was very surreal,
Yeah.
um, and, but uh, we talked with our managers, we talked, about, um, what we might be covering, we talked about all kinds, I mean, even, the minutia, things like scheduling,
Yeah.
the equipment we might need, all sorts of things that, you don't really think about until, uh, you know, you have to go and do it. So,
Yeah.
there's just a lot of stuff to be taken care of. But everyone, I will say, was professional. It was a cordial atmosphere today. I don't see any reason why that can't continue.
Hmm.
I know the striking workers are all going to be professional and
Yeah.
respectful and cordial. Um, And, I just hope that moving forward, as I've told other people, our main focus should be on quality journalism and serving the people of Pittsburgh.
If you're just joining me, I'm Natalie Bencivenga, and I'm chatting with Andrew Goldstein, the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh President. We're talking about the longest strike in American history finally coming to an end right here in Pittsburgh, happening at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Can you talk a little bit about the victory here and what it is that you were fighting for? And for people that were not a part of the guild or people that did cross the picket line, will they sort of reap the benefits as well? And how does that feel?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, So yes, so this victory, what it does, and specifically the big win that we had at the U.S. Third Circuit Court of Appeals, essentially puts our previous contract back in place. That's the one I was telling you about from 2014 to 2017.
Uh-huh.
And so all the terms and conditions of that contract, including the pay, including the healthcare, which, I mean, we're talking about 2014 prices, so there's gonna be,
Yeah.
real savings there, at least until we bargain a new contract. Um, and all sorts of other rights. As I mentioned earlier, some of the most basic rights, like having a guarantee of a 40-hour work week, having our overtime properly counted, having vacation, seniority, layoff protections, all those things. And so that's really what this fight was about. There are certainly going to be financial repercussions to the Post Gazette just because of the differences between the conditions that were imposed after the Post Gazette declared an impasse. And so, certainly, the striking workers will reap some benefits from that. But as you mentioned, the workers who continued to produce the Post Gazette during the strike are absolutely going to really be getting financially rewarded. There's going to be a lot of back pay involved. There's going to be the differences financially in terms of the benefits that should have been in place. Um, and the folks who continued working are going to get all of that, and maybe even more so than the striking workers, because our benefits and back pay only counts until the time we went on strike. So that was only a couple years, whereas I you know I can foresee that there's a good argument to be made that those folks would be getting paid for that whole time. So, yeah, I mean but again, my job, not my job, but the job of the guild isn't to take away money from our members. It's to put money in your pocket and to give you, protections at work. And
Yes.
so I think that's something that we can all agree on, that we're all going to benefit from. And, I don't have any hard feelings about it at all. I think that's
Hmm.
us doing our job, doing what we should be
Hmm.
doing.
Will they all join the union? Like, is that how it will work now? If the union members are back for those people that are there that were replacement workers, do they join the union now?
Well, we're still kind of hammering out some of the finer details as far as
Okay.
that goes. I do know that each and every one of them will be welcome with open arms.
Hmm.
There's going to be some work to get folks signed up. There may be, um, some kind of training or something that needs to be done, some kind of approval process, and we're still talking about that with our strikers and with the executive board.
Hmm.
So I'll be honest, it's not entirely clear to me yet exactly
Sure.
what we're going to be doing, just because we need to finalize those discussions. But
Mhm.
again, I'll say that this, I mean, we're not out for any retribution.
Right.
We want the best for everyone involved here.
Hmm.
Even if
That's
we
why you went
disagree
on
with people.
strike.
Yeah.
Because you wanted the best for everyone. I mean, I think that was the whole point. And I think that's really the important part to take away from this is the impact that unions have and all of those things that you mentioned, those workplace protections, they're there because of people willing to go and fight for them like you. And I really admire you and the other guild members for doing what you did and standing your ground and being in your conviction, no matter how hard it was. And I hope you know that and you feel that. What do you want people, though, to take away from this experience that for people that maybe don't know that much about unions or understand the history of them in this part of the country? What is it about unions that is so important?
Yeah, I mean, that's, such a big question. I think union density in this country is at one of its lowest points ever,
Yeah.
certainly in the last century. Um, but, there's a reason why I think a lot of people don't know the history here because,
Hmm.
there are laws in place and there are rights that people have that simply uh, uh, is 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 better for big corporations and big business,
That's
and
right.
in some cases, politicians not to let people know.
Hmm.
Um, growing up in Pittsburgh, I'm born and raised here in Pittsburgh, so, I grew up across the river from where the Battle of Homestead took place, and so I kind of, had an understanding of that. Um, but, I think a lot of people probably don't have that same kind of education, and so, I know that, unions in some circles are controversial and talked badly about, and certainly, no entity is perfect.
Hmm.
We're entities run by people, and people have their faults.
Yeah.
Um, but the truth is, these entities are meant to protect people, as I said, to put money in their wallets, to do
Hmm.
what's right for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's the way I see it. I see it as really a public service.
Hmm.
And so, while I know opinions certainly on unions have been shifting in the past few years much more positively, I just hope that continues. I hope people really start to understand that, um, when working people unite, we have so much power, and but you have to go and do it.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can just sit and watch other people do. You have to be active. You have to participate, and you have to get involved. And so, yeah.
No, that's the truth. You said it all. As we wrap this up, I would be remiss not to bring up the Pittsburgh Union Progress (PUP), which was the strike publication, which I absolutely loved reading. You guys were doing such incredible work there. Can you talk a little bit about what that feels like to let that go now that you're going to be back at the Pittsburgh Post Gazette? And what do you want to bring with you from that publication, either energetically or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pup gave us an ability to be a little more open, a little more creative
Hmm.
with what we wanted to cover.
Hmm.
I still think in many ways, we covered a lot of things like we would have just as we were at the Post Gazette.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, the coverage that we had of high school sports was just, I mean, they didn't miss a beat.
Hmm.
The coverage of, for example, the situation in East Palestine was
Hmm.
as good or maybe even better than we could have done at the Post Gazette, just because we had a reporter, Steve Mellon, who was so
Yeah.
deeply involved in that story. And so, you know, um, I think what we tried to do with Pup is look at the communities that were being ignored, or
Mhm.
the communities that may have been, you know, uh, 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 anxious about maybe talking to the Post Gazette, but
Mhm.
this you know little strike publication. Sure, we can talk to you. And
Mhm.
so, I think that obviously there's a lot of rebuilding to do, but I hope that we can continue that coverage, that we can make those communities continue to feel seen and give them, proper coverage, and let those voices be heard, because that's really what's important for us. And that was, I think, something that Pup did uh, extremely well, and we have the ability to bring that to the Post Gazette now.
Andrew, as we wrap this up, and thank you so much for your time on such an important day. I appreciate you making space for this conversation. If people are thinking of starting a union at their place of employment, or if they've been approached and they're they would like to join, but maybe they're nervous or scared to join? What's some advice you can share?
Sure. Well, I would say certainly talk to your coworkers,
Mhm.
um, maybe in a kind of coy way for sure. Um, but you don't have to go outright and say, "Hey, do you want to form a union?" Talk about workplace issues.
Yeah.
Um, Listen, everyone has had a bad boss.
Mm,
Everyone has had a horror story at work that, they could see coming or could have done differently.
mm,
And so, when you start to talk to your coworkers about the issues they face on a day-to-day basis, uh, you know, you realize that the problems you have are probably very similar to the problems that your colleagues have. And so, uh, you know, talk to people. And you know, don't be afraid to be bold, to take courageous steps. Um, it's not they don't make it easy for people a lot of times in this country, but certainly it's worth that fight. And I couldn't recommend higher that anyone who feels like they're being mistreated or who has the potential to be mistreated because hey, your boss might be great today, but if they leave or, you get a new boss tomorrow, there's no guarantee that you're gonna feel the same way. So,
right,
everyone deserves a union, everyone deserves those protections. Um,
right.
and talk to your coworkers, what are the issues they face?
Amen to
Because they're
that.
probably the same as yours.
Andrew Goldstein, thank you so much for spending time in conversation with me tonight, for being a part of Facts Over Fear. If people want to follow along with the journey of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh, where can they go?
So you can continue to follow us on social media at PGH Guild on Twitter. I believe that's the same handle on Instagram. We also have our Facebook account, which is the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh. Um, and of course, you'll hopefully in the very near future be seeing a lot of those pup bylines and more back in the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. So
I look forward to
feel
being
free.
able to read the Post Gazette again now that the strike is hopefully behind us. I
Absolutely.
appreciate you and thank you again so much. Thank you to everybody that tuned in. And as always, please take care of yourselves and each other. Good night, everyone.